Bandidos, what's up? Let's talk about the Division 2 Season 3 modifiers. We've got some solid new mechanics in play, and if you want to maximize your loot, optimize your build, and avoid wasting time on subpar options, you're in the right place. This is the definitive breakdown of the Season 3 modifiers, explained, ranked into a tier list based on effectiveness, usability, and overall impact on gameplay. Not everyone's going to agree with these rankings because different builds and playstyles mean different experiences. But what we're doing here is cutting through the noise and highlighting the most lucrative modifiers, the ones that can make or break your efficiency in this season's content. And if you're missing out on those top picks, you're leaving power and loot on the table. Let's do this.
Wait, did we just become best friends? So nice to meet you. I think you're cool.
Piece of shit wristwatch.
So Rogue Momentum is the global modifier that sets the tone for the entirety of Season 3. It's all about high risk, high reward, aggressive play. You gain momentum by eliminating enemies with greater bonuses the more momentum you've gained. Max tier is basically overcharge plus for both your weapons and your skills. Blacklisted enemies add another layer of strategy. Kill them and you get a momentum boost and some handling and crit buffs. Take damage from them and your momentum drains at a 15x faster rate. So to make it simple and put Rogue Momentum in a nutshell, get to max momentum as fast as possible and hold on to it as long as possible. That's it. That's what we're talking about. So where does Rogue Momentum land in the tier system? Well, it's going to be S tier, no question, because it is built around one of the best global event concepts, Golden Bullet, and provides even more value and utility than Golden Bullet. There's no real downside to this, and you get 10% more seasonal XP gains when it's active. Modifiers are new, but this is considerably better than last season. As far as balance, there are certain enemies that can be impossible to kill with certain builds when in that frenzy state. I think that needs tuning, but otherwise everything feels very nice. I'll boil it down to this. We've never been so strong and well-rounded as this. Simple as that. Now let's evaluate our active modifiers. There are 3 total active modifiers. You could only equip one and you have to engage them during combat in order for them to apply their effect. Let's start with Overdrive. This is your go big or go home pick. Activate it and for 10 seconds you get plus 30% rate of fire, 30% weapon damage, and 30% skill damage, and unlimited ammo. This is on top of your tier 5 momentum bonuses. Sounds broken, right? Well, there's a catch. After the 10-second rush, your momentum gain rate is slashed by 70% for 150 seconds. But here's the deal. If you time Overdrive right, it's a game changer. Pop it as you enter a checkpoint or before a new wave, when you're swarmed by enemies or a boss fight, and you'll delete everything inside. That penalty sounds bad on paper, but in all seriousness, momentum is pretty easy to maintain with a decent build. I don't even notice it. Using this in the most difficult content, I am able to maintain maximum momentum nearly indefinitely. And that's the name of the game. In other words, I don't even notice that 70% slash to my momentum gain once Overdrive goes into cooldown for 150 seconds. So with that being the case, Overdrive is S tier because it provides the strongest burst of power in the game, and the penalty is manageable if you know what you're doing. Now let's talk about tactical supremacy. So if you're running a defensive setup, especially with shield modifiers like critical recovery, this one's worth a look. It doubles all of your passive bonuses for 15 seconds. Sounds good, right? But there's a catch. They all have a catch. During those 15 seconds, you're locked out of momentum gain. Once it ends, there's a 60-second cooldown before you can use it again. If you've stacked defensive passives, extra armor regen, shield health boosts, or healing on crits, tactical supremacy turns those into a short but powerful survival window. And since the game's mechanics allow extensions like headshot or skill kill bonuses, you can stretch it by a maximum of 25 seconds. But there's the trade-off. Extending it means extending no momentum, but that momentum decay, well, that's still there. Where this really shines is in tank builds that don't care about momentum or that have trouble earning it. These types of builds will also have trouble extending tactical supremacy with headshot kills or skill kills. But if you're playing the role of an unbreakable wall, soaking up damage, holding choke points, and keeping enemies focused on you, this is the best active modifier. But here's why it doesn't crack the top tier. That 15-second duration, even with potential extensions, isn't always enough to justify the trade-off. If your build doesn't rely on strong passive modifiers, this won't do much for you. And the cooldown forces you to time it perfectly, making it more situational than game-breaking. Final verdict, B tier. Let's take a closer look at the Vendetta active modifier. So Vendetta is a high risk, high reward modifier that's going to challenge you to eliminate marked enemies within a tight window for significant defensive bonuses while penalizing failure. So when you activate Vendetta, multiple random enemies are marked for elimination. Not all of them, just some of them, and RNG will decide. You have 30 seconds to kill each marked enemy. If you fail to kill them according to their mark, then you're going to take a 15% armor penalty. If you ignore them altogether, nothing will happen. If you damage them but don't kill them, nothing will happen. So bonuses depend on how you secure the kill. Primary weapon kills, plus 25% bonus armor for 10 seconds. Skill kills, 70% damage reduction for 10 seconds. That's huge. Pistol kills, 50% bonus armor for 10 seconds. Here's what's unique. Marks are visible to allies, and rewards and penalties apply only to the shooter. So whatever I kill, I get the benefit from, but my allies don't get that benefit. But they can kill and get a benefit or a penalty without it affecting me. This is also going to override blacklist marks while active, and this is going to revert after the effect ends. And this will have a 30-second cooldown. This is a great fit for support or healer builds that don't rely on momentum, but the risks of this active modifier are real. Avoiding a marked enemy that is aggressively rushing you because eliminating them would mean a 15% armor penalty can be brutal in high-end content. But most marks are for primary weapons, which offers the weakest bonus but is more forgiving in terms of elimination. But those pistol kills, which are annoying, are difficult in team play due to enemy health and competition for eliminations. So what's my final verdict? Well, it's going to be a B tier. All right, let's look at these fancy passive modifiers. So there are 12 total, and you can only equip 3 at a time. The first one is called Aggressive Drone. The aggressive drone modifier juices up your striker drone with a 50% damage increase, but chops its duration by 40%. It's a trade-off that screams aggression, hit hard, hit fast, and don't look back. But does it deliver enough to justify a spot in your build? A 50% bump in damage, that extra punch can shred health bars in seconds. But cutting duration by 40% is pretty brutal. If your drone usually lasts 30 seconds, you're down to 18. So to squeeze the most out of aggressive drone, you will be required to tweak your build with attributes that shrink the drone's downtime and keep you in the fight, like duration mods. But here's why I put it in A tier. The damage boost is undeniable. While the 40% durations isn't nothing, it's easy to compensate without any impact to real damage. More importantly, drones usually get shot down in difficult content before they run their duration, and many times making the hit to duration a moot point. It's not S tier because it's got a built-in penalty, but aggressive drone is a high-risk, high-reward modifier that delivers exactly what it promises. Okay, before we get into the next few modifiers, we need to have a quick sidebar on how momentum decay works. So momentum isn't permanent. It naturally decays over time. So let's talk about how that happens. If we look at the decay rate by tier, tier 5, which is just a little sliver or a partial tier, decays in about 20 seconds. That's 1% per second. Tiers 1 through 4, or the bottom tiers, which are full tiers, each decays in 58 seconds, 0.34% per second. So if we take those and make an average decay rate, that would be 0.45% per second, or almost 0.5% per second over the full range. So if you're not constantly generating momentum, your bar will drop steadily. In addition, blacklisted targets dramatically accelerates momentum loss when you take damage from a marked enemy. Instead of the normal decay rate, momentum drains 15 times faster for 5 seconds after getting hit. Now to the critical momentum passive modifier. This is all about feeding your momentum bar through critical hits. Every time you land a crit, there's a 40% chance to gain 1% momentum. Sounds small? It adds up fast, but the question is, how well does it hold up against natural decay and blacklisted targets? If you're running a high fire rate, high crit build like an SMG, let's say the Vector with a 1200 RPM, you're gaining an average of 4.8% momentum per second, meaning you can hit max stacks in about 21 seconds. Since momentum naturally decays at 0.45% per second, or almost 0.5% per second, this keeps your stacks up without needing constant kills. But we have these blacklisted targets. So since taking damage from a blacklisted target enemy drains momentum 15 times faster for 5 seconds, which is about 6.75% per second, critical momentum can partially counteract this decay if you land at least 7 critical hits per second, which is going to be easier with SMGs and harder with rifles. And what's really great about this is that this is all happening passively. You're shooting anyways, so there's no real extra effort needed. So my final verdict, critical momentum is A tier. All right, let's size up this critical recovery modifier real quick. So this one gives you 0.5% of your max armor back every time you crit, which sounds cool, right? But is it worth it? Well, how much armor are we talking? 725,000 armor? Well, you're gonna get 3,625 armor back per crit. 1.1 million armor, that's 5,500. 2 million armor, a solid 10,000 back per crit. So tankier builds get more juice, right? But how often do you really crit? Well, say you're running the same SMG build and you've got a 60% crit chance, which is pretty normal if you're stacking into it. So the Vector SMG with 1200 RPMs as an example puts out 20 shots per second. So that's around 12 crits per second. So 725,000 armor, which is a 6 red core build, is going to give you 43,500 armor back per second. 1.1 million in armor build, 66,000. 2 million armor build, 120,000 back per second. So fast guns equal big armor chunks. Slow ones, more like a trickle. So what's that mean in a fight? Vector is pulling back 6% of your armor per second, super handy when bullets are flying. So if you're rocking a fast weapon, this keeps you alive longer. No effort needed, just shoot. It's sufficient enough to not need a repair drone or armor on kill when running high RPM DPS crit builds. The catch? You gotta land crits. Miss a lot? It's useless. Final take, it's A tier. The explosive amp modifier promises to double the damage of seeker mines when they strike blacklisted enemies. At first glance, this sounds like a game changer. Doubling damage could transform seeker mines into a devastating weapon. However, its real-world effectiveness hinges on 2 critical factors: how often blacklisted enemies appear and whether seeker mines can reliably target and eliminate them. Explosive builds are typically built around skills like seeker mines and the artillery turret, paired with the demolition specialization to maximize explosive damage. This setup, while powerful, clashes with explosive amp. More on that in a sec, but first you need to understand the rarity problem. Blacklisted enemies aren't common. Without specific mods and skills to boost their spawn rate, they appear sporadically at best. To increase their frequency, you need a scanning skill combined with the Reaper scan modifier. But explosive builds can't slot one without sacrificing a key damage skill, which would gut the build's overall effectiveness. The demolitionist specialization is essential for boosting explosive damage, but tweaking the build, like running technician to add a laser pointer to mark enemies, requires giving up the artillery turret and explosive damage. This trade-off undermines the build entirely, making it an impractical adjustment. This sort of creates a frustrating catch-22. Explosive amp needs blacklisted enemies to be relevant, but explosive builds can't practically increase blacklisted enemy spawns without weakening themselves. As a result, the modifier's uptime is severely limited. Blacklisted enemies don't show up nearly enough naturally to make the boost reliable, and the popular cluster seeker mines cover a wide area, but this comes at the cost of accuracy. Even if a blacklisted enemy is present, there's no guarantee the mines will target it, leaving you reliant on random chance. Final verdict, the explosive amp modifier gets the C tier rating. Now we have explosive expertise modifier. Explosive skill kills reduce the cooldown of that skill by 30% if you score a multi-kill. So this is a conditional perk, and its value hinges on how reliably you can achieve a multi-kill, and 2, whether the cooldown reduction meaningfully improves the skill's performance. We have the artillery turret, cluster seekers, explosive traps, explosive sticky bombs, and the explosive seeker. For the artillery turret, the modifier has no essential impact for this skill because it doesn't benefit from the cooldown reduction, so let's just move on. Let's talk about the cluster seeker mines. So these are designed to hit multiple targets. These mines should theoretically excel with multi-kills, but they're notoriously inconsistent, prone to missing targets or failing to detonate properly, making reliable multi-kills a real challenge. So the modifier's potential is undermined by the skill's unreliability. And for infinite seeker mine builds, which is the most popular way and probably the best way to run clusters, this modifier doesn't even have an application. It's redundant. Explosive traps can see value here. These cover a broad area and can net multi-kills if enemies wander into them, but they're rarely used and their success depends heavily on enemy positioning, which isn't always predictable. So the modifier could work well here, but the skill's niche status limits its relevance. The two best applications are likely the explosive sticky bomb and explosive seeker mine. Both skills have decently short cooldowns that benefit from a 30% reduction, and multi-kills are highly possible due to their range or their radius. The downside is that they're typically precision strike tools, so multi-kills aren't always consistent. The explosive expertise modifier's biggest hurdle is its reliance on multi-kills. That said, explosive expertise is limited but acceptable. I'd rate it B tier. Alright, let's chat about this fortified shield thing. Honestly, it's kind of cool. So here's the deal. Shields in this game get tougher the more skill tiers you stack, and armor cores, the blue ones, count as tiers for your shield. You can go from tier 0 all the way up to tier 6. Each tier pumps up your shield's health. It starts at base tier 0, then goes to tier 1, which gives you like 40% more health, and by tier 6 you're rocking 250% more health. And again, overcharge, that's just infinite health. No biggie. Now fortified shield slides in and says, let's double that base health right off the bat. So instead of kicking things off with, say, 1 million health, you're starting at 2 million. Then all those juicy tier bonuses pile on top of that. So think about this. At tier 0, you're already sitting pretty at 200% of your base health. That's equivalent to a tier 3 shield. Why is that cool? Well, normally if you want a beefy shield, you've got to stack those armor cores, but that means ditching the red weapon damage cores. And nobody wants to hit like a wet noodle. With fortified shields, you get that extra shield oomph without dropping your DPS. Also, if your shield breaks, it's totally a buzzkill in a fight. Doubling the base health makes it way less likely to crack on you when you really need it to not. Downsides? Sure. Directly, it's all defense. There's no extra push to grind momentum quicker. But if you're shield bro, this thing's a solid grab because indirectly, it does help you build momentum because you don't have to add armor cores for a stronger shield and you have more damage to build momentum. You're tougher all around. Final verdict? I'd slap it in the A tier category. Let's chat about why microwave coils is such a beast. This modifier is all about controlling crowds and stacking momentum fast. And honestly, it's got S tier vibes written all over it. Here's the breakdown. Microwave coils burn up to 4 enemies every time you hit them with the pulse. The burn status effect ticks damage over time, pops them out of cover, and distracts them. They stumble around looking lost and can't shoot or rush you properly. This shuts them down, giving you and your squad some breathing room. On top of crowd control, microwave coils is a momentum building machine. Every burned enemy gives you 5% momentum. Pulse 4, and that's 20% right there, no sweat. Since there's no cooldown on the modifier's effect, you can pulse a second group for another 20%. That's 40% momentum in like what, 2 seconds? This keeps you stacking like crazy. Pair it with gear or skills that pulse without a cooldown and you're basically printing momentum. It's fast, it's furious, and gets you to those higher tiers quickly. Okay, there's a small hitch. Once you pulse an enemy, you can't pulse them again until the effect wears off. But does it ruin the party? Nah. Here's why. Most enemies die or get replaced by new spawns before the pulse expires. You're not sitting there twiddling your thumbs waiting to hit the same group again. Microwave coils isn't just good, it's S tier. Here's what seals the deal. It's the full package. Control the fight and stack bonuses all at once. Few modifiers pull off that double threat combo this well, and there are a lot of ways to pulse enemies, so it's an easy thing to integrate into many kinds of builds. Alright, so here's the scoop. Momentum Surge doubles the momentum you snag every time you take out an enemy with a skill. If you're dual wielding skills like a striker drone and an assault turret, which we know you are, this perks like a turbo boost for climbing that momentum ladder. Stuff like cluster seekers or an artillery turret can shred a whole crew in one shot, so they also win from this too. Okay, blacklisted targets. This mod turns them into gold. They drop extra momentum and buffs, and now get even juicier with Momentum Surge. Hit Momentum Tier 5 and you get that overcharge, and your skills get all jacked up. More damage, longer run times, the works. Momentum Surge gets you there faster, and this makes your drone a turret of beast. Stronger kills means more bodies means more momentum, and you're just cruising in overcharge mode. Plus tier 5 momentum throws in extra damage for everything. Weapons too, not just skills. Your whole vibe gets a boost. Final take, Momentum Surge is straight up S tier. It's easy for dual wielding skill builds. Alright, let's evaluate this Overclocked projector modifier for the decoy skill. The modifier states the decoy skill emits a bright flash when destroyed or deactivated, blinding up to 2 hostiles targeting it. When you do, you're going to receive 5% bonus momentum for every affected hostile. The range is 40 meters. The base stat for a decoy is about 23 seconds in cooldown and a 19.4 second duration with a 100% threat rating, and the ability to pulse enemies targeting it. The flash effect blinds and disorients enemies for a few seconds, a useful crowd control tool. However, the flash only affects enemies targeting the decoy. Keyword is targeting. Despite its 100% threat rating, aggro isn't guaranteed. Some enemies might ignore it in chaotic fights. Consistently blinding 2 enemies is optimistic. Averaging 1 or 5% momentum is more likely. With everything being considered, in gameplay, Overclocked Projector feels situational. Other options will often outperform Overclocked Projector, and that's why it's going to be rated as a B tier. Reactive Reinforcement. Here's the gist. When your shield gets hit, Reactive Reinforcement restores 5% of your max armor, but only once every 10 seconds. It's not a per hit heal, it triggers once when you're struck. Then you're stuck waiting out that cooldown, no matter how much punishment your shield takes after that. So, trigger, shield takes damage. Heal, 5% of your maximum armor. Catch, 10-second cooldown locks it down. Simple enough, but that cooldown is a killer. Let's look at 3 common armor levels. Base armor at around 725,000, which is typical for a full DPS build. Comfy armor will be around 1.1 million armor, and max armor is 2 million. So the 5% heal works out at the base, or 725k armor, to be about 36,250 armor once every 10 seconds. The comfy amount, or that 1.1 million armor, is going to pay out 55,000 armor once every 10 seconds, and the max 2 million armor is going to give you 100,000 armor. At first glance, 100k armor for a tank sounds alright, right? But hold up, getting that heal only once every 10 seconds changes the game in a bad way. The cooldown kills it because a 10-second wait is brutal. In tough content, say heroic control points or legendary strongholds, enemies hit hard and fast. If you've got 1.1 million armor, you might take 150k damage in a single shot from an elite. One shot is nearly an armor core. It's like tossing a band-aid on a gaping wound. Overall, it's just too weak for real fights. So my verdict, it's a poopy tier modifier at best. The Reaper scan tweaks the game by giving enemies you pulse a 25% shot at getting a blacklist mark. These blacklisted enemies are a double-edged sword. Upside, drop one and you score bonus momentum plus some nice buffs, better weapon handling or crit chance. Downside, if they land a hit on you, your momentum drains 15 times faster for 5 seconds. Ouch. Here's the deal with the Reaper scan. That 25% chance to see blacklisted targets pop up is a decent amount, but it's a gamble. Get tagged and your momentum's toast. If you're rocking an SMG or shotgun and love running around exposed out of cover, Good luck. Blacklisted enemies hitting you will tank your momentum fast. Playing legendary missions, even there, don't mess around. Those blacklisted bullets can wipe your progress, and dodging everything in those modes is a very tall order. So let's stack it up. If you stick to cover, you can cash in without sweating the downside too much. Cons, that 15x drain penalty is a gut punch. 5 seconds is enough to ruin your groove. Is it worth it? Well, compared to modifiers that hand you steady momentum, like kill bonuses or raw damage boosts, Reaper Scan's a wild card. It's high risk, high reward. Awesome when you're in control, but a liability when you're not. Reaper Scan's a niche pick. I'd slap it with a C tier rating. The Rig Battery modifier. Player drones that are destroyed or dismantled apply shock to 2 nearby enemies. Receive 5% bonus momentum for every affected hostile. On the surface, this may look like it sucks, but there are some cool applications. This can apply to a DPS build, using a defender drone to build and maintain momentum. All cores allocated to weapon damage, so no skill tiers. The defender drone has an 18-second cooldown and a 20-second duration, and it reduces incoming damage by 60% when overcharged. In a DPS build, your damage output hinges on weapons, not skills. The defender drone reduces incoming damage to keep you in the fight longer. Rigged Battery adds an offensive twist. When the drone is destroyed by enemies, or it runs its duration, it shocks 2 nearby enemies, providing brief crowd control, and grants 5% bonus momentum per shocked enemy, up to 10% per trigger. It's not a headline grabbing modifier and won't revolutionize your build, but it's a solid choice to boost momentum and survivability. The downside again is the competition for the modifier slot on a DPS build. If you're running crits, you likely have better options. And because of this, Rig Battery is a B tier modifier. Alright, that was a lot to cover. What is your favorite combination of modifiers? Give them to us.
Thank you for hanging out with me. I'm Tuxedo Bandido, and if you found this video helpful, be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on the good stuff I have coming for you. And if you like content like this, be sure to check out the video I have recommended for you right here. If you have anything you would like me to cover, be sure to let me know in the comments below. And thank you to all the channel members and donors who make things possible. Tux Nation wouldn't be the same without you.
When you buy a game from Ubisoft, enter the creator code Tuxedo Bandido to support the channel. Easy peasy.
Wait, did we just become best friends?